what do you make of the equivalency that President Trump is trying to draw here between Putin and Zelensky, knowing, of course, that Russia invaded Ukraine? Does it really take two to tango?
Well, to end the war, both countries have to stop. But of course, Zelensky has been completely willing to abide by really the U.S.-led effort with NATO to implement a ceasefire. So Ukraine has been completely willing to do that for months now. And there really is great solidarity between and among NATO countries and Ukraine. It is Russia that continues the assault against Ukraine and is really thumbing its nose at President Trump's peace efforts, especially as we saw these 19 drones, Russian drone incursions into Polish NATO member, of course, airspace just recently, which elicited a NATO response. And so I think President Trump is now working with Congress to get a sanctions package ready to impose against the Russians.
Yeah. Well, therefore, isn't the burden on Vladimir Putin to stop the war and meet President Zelensky at least halfway at the negotiating table?
Well, no, this is 100% at this point. This is just Russia that continues to perpetuate the war. Ukraine clearly is willing to do what is necessary to end it. And you saw the United States join other NATO countries and more than 40 countries in condemning Russia's incursion into Polish airspace and to support NATO's efforts to make sure that Polish airspace remains secure and sovereign. So the United States is supporting this pressure now against the Russians.
Well, what needs to happen here? You've mentioned Poland a couple times, and this is a big deal this week. We've got an Article 4 incursion, and both yesterday and today, President Trump suggested that it may have been a mistake. The Prime Minister of Poland took to Twitter to say this was no mistake. I wish it was, but it's not. And there's talk of NATO beefing up its defenses along the eastern NATO front. What should happen when this Article 4 review is concluded?
So in the Article 4, of course, just requires all NATO members to consult with Poland, who is invoking this, to come up with a NATO response. And NATO is going to have, I think they're calling it Eastern Sentry, to bolster the eastern front of the NATO alliance. I always like to say NATO is only as strong as the eastern front is secure, the Baltic countries and Poland. And so that's what we're seeing now. You're seeing some members of NATO step up and make sure that they're going to provide extra support to Poland. And that's, of course, to deter further Russian testing of the solidarity of the NATO alliance.
Yeah. Well, what is this test? What's Vladimir Putin up to? Is he trying to find the line on Article 5?
He might be. And it almost doesn't matter if it was an accident. You know, the point is it's Russia's war of aggression against Ukraine. It's reckless. It's conducting these attacks near a NATO border. And so I think that Putin is testing to see how NATO would respond. NATO has responded pretty good, has provided some extra support for Poland. But the other thing that's really important, because you asked about sort of where the United States is on sanctions, it's interesting, a couple days ago, Marjorie Taylor Greene in the House of Representatives tried to defund support for Ukraine, and it was opposed in a bipartisan fashion in the House. Republicans joining Democrats to say, no, we're not going to oppose support for Ukraine anymore. So the temper has changed, and there is now broad support to put pressure on the Russians.
You're right, Rebeccah, and that did not get enough coverage. That was actually a pretty important moment in the messaging for the White House, I suspect, was influential as well. At the same time, if an Article 4 incursion doesn't trigger secondary sanctions, what will?
Well, it should. Secondary sanctions, of course, would be against those countries that continue to buy Russian oil, which is fueling the Russian war machine. Obviously, the two countries that do that the most are China and India. I mean, I would hope that we would put more pressure on China. We still need Indian help and support for countering China. And right now, just the White House has been only willing to put sanctions on the Indians. But it is my hope that we really turn the screws on the Chinese, because they really are the ones that are backing the Russian war effort.
Rebeccah Heinrichs, you're a national security expert, and I wonder your thoughts on what's happened this week domestically here in the killing of Charlie Kirk, the political rhetoric, and the possibility of continued political violence. What happens next?
Oh, well, first of all, I mean, we're all grieving. I think that those of us who have made the point that the fact that Charlie really would go into university campuses to have open discourse to change people's minds. I mean, really, his assassination is a political assassination. It's attack on the First Amendment and really gets to the core of who we are as a free country. I thought Governor Cox of Utah made the really important point that there's going to be Russian and Chinese adversaries on social media trying to use this moment to further foment hate and anger and even violence between and among Americans. And it's good to just get off social media and get in the real world and hug your loved ones and get to know your neighbors.
Yeah, throw your phone in the ocean. How would you grade the FBI's handling of this case? We saw a big victory lap this morning from Kash Patel, but this is a suspect who turned himself in.
Well, I mean, I think it was his father. Just another painful aspect of this is that it was a family, it was his own father who understood that he was the one who did this. And so he went to the FBI. I think the FBI was extremely eager to catch the person who committed this crime as quickly as possible. And so there's a couple of, I think, false starts and thinking that they had caught the individual a couple of times and they didn't. Right. But here we are only just, pretty recently after the assassination, and he's caught. And so we're glad that he's apprehended. But of course, the grieving just continues, especially as we learned that, his family must deal with now the grief, knowing that one of their own members of their family committed this just grievous, terrible assaults on the First Amendment, and of course, taking the life of Charlie Kirk, a father and a husband.
How important is bipartisanship in national security, Rebeccah?
Well, look, we've got all kinds of divisions inside the United States, and we can continue to have those arguments through our words and through persuasion. But when it comes to protecting the sovereignty and the security of the American people, it has to be bipartisan. We've got external threats, the Chinese, Russians, North Koreans, Islamist radicalism, the Iranians, are all trying to harm the United States, weaken the United States, and make sure that we can't protect ourselves and our sovereignty. And so it's crucial that we must have bipartisan support on handling and deterring and against those outside threats, so that we can, through debate and discourse and our legal system, deal with the differences that we have, compromise, and go through the political process. And so it's really important, especially now, to understand that we have to get this right on national security policy.